The fire crackled in the clearing as dusk fell. What was once a chaotic battlefield had now quieted into a graveyard of scorched armor, shattered weapons, and still burning underbrush. The last rays of sunlight filtered through the dense treetops, painting everything in shades of rust and crimson. Inigo stood over the body of one of the fallen elites, crouching down to inspect the strange emblem Lyra had picked up earlier. It was small, no larger than a palm but intricately carved. A black serpent coiled around a burning tower, its eye etched with a crimson gemstone. The symbol pulsed faintly as if it still carried a residual charge of magic. "This isn't just branding," Inigo muttered. "This is a seal." Ariane stood beside him, her white robes now stained with dirt and ash. "The enchantments woven into it are beyond common war binding. I sense layers of compulsion magic, blood sigils, even sacrificial binding. Someone fed lives into this." "That's sick," Lyra muttered. She had found a stump and was restringing her bow with swift, practiced hands. This wasn't a simple hit squad. This was meant to send a message. Korik let out a snort as he dragged a body toward a growing pile. Well, message failed. "We're still breathing." "Barely," Inigo said. "And we're not done." He pocketed the emblem and rose to his feet, brushing soot from his coat. "Ariane, can you trace where this thing was made? Or who made it?" She frowned. "Not from here. I'd need a sanctified scrying basin, runic amplifiers, and probably the blood of the warbinder himself." "Bit late for that last one," Korik muttered, wiping gore from his axe. "We might be able to work around it," Ariane added thoughtfully. "If we bring the emblem to the arcane registry in Elandra, they might be able to identify its maker. These kinds of sigils require rare inks and materials. Someone would have had to register their imports or black market trades." Inigo nodded. "Then we're heading back. We can't risk continuing the Rift mission with an unknown player this bold operating right under our noses." Lyra looked up sharply. "The king's not going to like that." "He'll understand," Inigo replied. "We eliminate the local threat first. Otherwise we'll be fighting on two fronts." Korik slammed the MRAP's back door shut. "Well, she still runs." "Barely." "I'll drive," Inigo said, climbing into the front seat. "Everyone mount up. We move before night fully falls." The road back to Elandra was quieter than before. Too quiet. No birds. No wildlife. Just the low growl of the MRAP's engine as it rolled through forest roads choked with shadow. Lyra sat in the gunner seat, scanning the treetops. Ariane leaned back, hands clasped as she focused on mending Korik's damaged gauntlet with a soft stream of healing light. Inside the cabin, Inigo kept his eyes forward. His thoughts swirled like a storm. That warbinder hadn't just been strong. He'd been disciplined, coordinated, fanatical. And he'd been part of something bigger. That emblem burned like a warning in his pocket. A cult? A guild? A mercenary league? No. This was different. More methodical. More malicious. He had seen enough games and war zones to know when something was designed to destabilize rather than defeat. A day later. 20 minutes, he said aloud. "Good," Lyra muttered. "I could use a hot bath and a bottle of elven wine." "We're going straight to the Citadel," Inigo reminded her. "No pit stops." She groaned. "You're no fun anymore." By the time they reached Elandra, the sky had darkened completely. The city gates opened without delay, guards recognizing the crest painted on the MRAP's side and waving them through. Torches flickered along the high stone walls, and the city's towering spires rose like fangs in the moonlight. They pulled up to the guild headquarters first. Thorn was already waiting. The old guild master stood with arms crossed, his expression unreadable. He wore a long coat over his armor, silver hair tied back, and a thin scar down his right cheek twitching slightly. "You were supposed to be heading towards the rift," he said coldly. "We did," Inigo replied as he stepped out. "Ran into an ambush. Mercenaries, no cultists, bound by war magic. Organized and well-armed." Thorn's eyes narrowed. "And?" Inigo tossed the emblem at his feet. "They wore that." Thorn picked it up and inspected it for a long moment. His expression shifted, barely but enough to notice. "You've seen it before," Lyra said sharply. "I've heard rumors," Thorn admitted. "A cult operating in the shadow of the Western Mountains. Black Tower acolytes. They were wiped out a decade ago. Supposedly. Well, Korik grunted. They're back. I'll summon the arcane registry, Thorn said. They'll want to test this. And you'll all need to make a report to the king. He'll be told, Inigo said. But not until we learn more. Hours later they stood once again in the royal palace. This time the throne room was dimmer, quieter. Only the king, Queen Lyra and Princess Erilyn were present, seated around a long table piled with maps and intelligence scrolls. You did well to return, the king said after Inigo recounted the battle. And you were right to postpone the mission. Erilyn tapped her finger on the emblem. This symbol matches one we found in the ruins near the Fellwood Pass last month. Our scouts dismissed it as petty necromancy. We were wrong. Queen Lyra looked to Ariane. Can it be traced? Yes, she answered. But I'll need access to the upper sanctum and a clean source of divine water. If the caster left a signature, I'll find it. Granted, the king said. Inigo leaned forward. If this group is working in cells, we need to root them out now. I want to lead the strike team. You've already been chosen, Erilyn replied. The guild will give you full operational control. And will expand your party if needed. Korik coughed. More friends, huh? Hopefully ones who don't explode, Lyra muttered. The king looked grave. Find their headquarters. If they are gathering for war again, we cannot afford to let them grow. Inigo nodded. We'll burn them out. That night, Inigo stood alone atop the western battlements, staring into the night. The city lights below glowed soft and golden. Somewhere out there, beyond the hills and rivers, was the heart of the darkness that had tried to kill them. The next morning came cold and gray. Clouds hung low over Alandra like a blanket of ash, casting a somber hue over the city's stone towers and copper domes. A thin fog curled along the battlements, and the banners of the Adventurers Guild snapped softly in the breeze. Inigo stood by the MRP in the courtyard of the inner citadel, arms crossed, staring at a newly delivered crate beside the vehicle. It had arrived from the arcane registry just minutes ago, delivered by two mages wearing deep green robes marked with the sigil of the royal seers. One of them had carried a sealed scroll, the other the crate itself. Inside the crate was a single item, a black compass-like disc etched with fine golden lines. It pulsed faintly with mana, spinning lazily even though no magnetic field should have affected it. Ariane examined it now, holding the disc between her palms like a sacred relic. It's called a trace finder. It uses residual mana signatures embedded in artifacts to detect the general direction of their creator. It's not exact, but if we follow its pull, we'll get close to where that warbinder was created. How close? Lyra asked, checking the fletching on a new batch of arrows. Close enough to smell the blood magic, Ariane said grimly. Korik thumped his chest with a mailed fist. Good. I'm ready to knock on their door. Then let's not waste time, Inigo said, climbing into the MRAP's driver's seat. Mount up. The faster we move, the less time they have to hide. They rolled out an hour later, past the western gate of Alandra. Guards saluted as the reinforced vehicle passed through the final checkpoint, their expressions grim but respectful. This time they had company. A new companion had joined them, Captain Garen Vanguard, a royal guard captain assigned by the king himself. He rode a sleek jet-black stallion alongside the Emmy, his armor polished to a mirror sheen and his long sword sheathed in a case engraved with arcane runes. He was young, perhaps no more than 30, but carried himself with the composure of a seasoned officer. You don't talk much, Captain, Lyra noted from the turret seat, glancing down at him as the vehicle rumbled alongside. I prefer listening, Garen said. And observing, especially that carriage of yours. We are befuddled too at first, but you'll get accustomed to it soon, Korik chuckled. Their route took them north first, following a lesser-known forest trail that paralleled the ancient trade roads, before veering west toward the roots of the Skyfall Mountains. The trace finder pulsed steadily in Ariane's lap. Each time they turned off course, the needle glowed brighter in correction. Hours passed. The forest deepened. Trees grew denser, their twisted limbs clawing at the sky like skeletal hands. Moss blanketed everything, and the road narrowed to a single overgrown path, barely wide enough for the Emmy. Then the needle stopped spinning. Ariane frowned. We're here. Inigo brought the vehicle to a halt beside a ruined stone marker, weathered and crumbling, half swallowed by ivy. Whatever village or outpost it once marked was long gone. Only the cracked stones remained. The forest beyond the marker thickened unnaturally. Even with midday light above, the interior was dark, too dark. "Magic's strong here," Ariane murmured. "Can you feel it?" Everyone nodded. Inigo popped the Mrap's side compartment and retrieved his M4 carbine. He handed Korik a stack of smoke grenades, gave Lyra a pouch of explosive arrowheads, and tossed Ariane a crystal lantern enchanted for dark space penetration. "Standard sweep," Inigo said. "Korik on point. Ariane and Garen in the center. Lyra and I on the flanks. Eyes open. No assumptions." They advanced into the woods on foot, weapons drawn. At first, the only sound was the crunch of leaves under boots and the faint hum of the tracefinder clutched in Ariane's hands. Then came the whispers. Faint. Distant. Wordless at first. Then just on the edge of recognition, half-thoughts, fragmented memories. "Is that?" Lyra whispered. "They're echoes," Ariane said. The trees were enchanted. They absorbed trauma, conflict, death. Garen stepped over a shattered helm half buried in moss. This was a battlefield. "A long time ago," Ariane confirmed. "But the magic never left." Suddenly the tracefinder flared bright gold. Inigo raised his hand. "Hold." Up ahead the trees opened into a clearing. In the center stood a stone obelisk, 12 feet tall, covered in black runes that seemed to move when no one looked directly at them. Around it lay the remains of a campsite. Extinguished fire pits, collapsed tents and blood-stained tools scattered across the ground. "Looks like someone left in a hurry," Garen said. "Or they didn't leave at all," Korik muttered. As they approached, the runes began to shimmer. Ariane raised her hand and cast a warding circle around the group. "That's no ordinary obelisk," she warned. "It's a focus. Probably tied to the Warbinder cell." Lyra paced around the site. "No bodies." Inigo crouched near a tent, brushing aside the flap with his shotgun. Inside was a diary, its pages still intact though the ink had faded. He flipped through it. Day 32. More supplies arriving from the Black Tower. "The binding stones are unstable, but Master Kale assures us the next ritual will succeed. The scouts claim Elandra suspects nothing. If we can hold this outpost another month, the gateway will open." Inigo looked up sharply. "Gateway. A portal," Ariane whispered. "This obelisk. It wasn't for summoning. It was a tether. A gate anchor." "To where?" Korik asked. As if in answer, the obelisk suddenly pulsed red. The runes ignited. The ground shook. "Get back!" Ariane yelled. A vortex of energy spiraled upward from the base of the obelisk, forming a swirling rift of light and shadow. The temperature dropped. Frost formed on nearby grass. And from the heart of the rift, something began to emerge. Inigo raised his shotgun. A skeletal figure stepped through, draped in black robes with chains dangling from its arms. Its skull was carved with glowing glyphs. Behind it, more shadows shifted, lurking just beyond the portal. "Contact!" Inigo barked. "Form up." Korik leapt forward with a roar, intercepting the first skeletal warrior with a brutal shield slam. Bones shattered. Garen unsheathed his sword, the runes along the blade flaring to life as he parried a strike and drove his blade into a second creature's chest. Light burst from the impact, vaporizing the undead instantly. Lyra fired enchanted arrows into the portal, striking figures before they could fully manifest. Ariane chanted rapidly, her voice rising in a prayer that summoned a dome of golden light around them. "We have to close the rift," she shouted. "How?" Inigo asked, blasting another skeletal creature off its feet. "The obelisk. We destroy it, now." Korik grunted. "On it." He charged, ignoring the clawed hands raking his armor, and slammed his axe into the base of the obelisk. Cracked but not enough. Inigo threw a smoke grenade to obscure the area, then sprinted forward beside him. "I've got a better way." He reached for the system interface. Item purchased, C4 plastic explosive, timer, 10 seconds. A small brick of high-yield plastic explosive appeared in his hand. He slapped it to the obelisk's base, armed the timer and shouted, "Get clear." Everyone scrambled back just as the charge detonated. The explosion split the obelisk down the middle. The rift shrieked, yes shrieked, as if alive before imploding into a point of red light and vanishing with a thunderclap. Silence fell. Nothing moved. Korik coughed and looked around. Everyone alive? Barely, Lyra said, pulling herself up from a bush. Garen nodded, wiping blood from his cheek. That's one rift closed. Ariane stood slowly, her face pale. But that was just one. Inigo stared at the smoking crater where the obelisk had stood. They're trying to open multiple. Lyra looked at him. How many do you think? He didn't answer. But in his heart he knew the answer wasn't one. It wasn't 10. It was far, far worse. And the race to stop them had just begun. The forest remained eerily still after the rift collapsed. No wind, no birdsong, not even the usual rustling of branches. It was as if the trees themselves were holding their breath. Inigo stood at the edge of the crater, boots sunk slightly into scorched soil. His shotgun hung loosely in one hand, barrel still warm. The air reeked of ozone and burnt magic. Somewhere behind him, Korik was panting like a warhorse, while Ariane leaned against a tree, beads of sweat trickling down her brow. This wasn't just a gate, Ariane finally said, voice hoarse. It was a test. Inigo turned. Explain. The portal wasn't stable. Not completely. Whoever opened it was testing the strength of their anchor. And now that it's destroyed, they'll know someone interfered. Garen wiped his sword on a rag, sheathed it, and joined them. We've bought time, not victory. And we've drawn their attention, Lyra added, brushing leaves from her cloak. They'll be looking for us now. Inigo knelt down, sifting through the remains of the obelisk. Among the shards he found something odd. A sliver of black crystal, warm to the touch, its surface pulsing with dull light. Ariane. She took it, inspecting it closely. This is shard core. Rare. And not native. This came from outside the continent. Garen's eyes narrowed. You're saying someone is importing magical anchor material to build these rifts? Ariane nodded slowly. And with precision. This wasn't just dark magic. It was engineered. Inigo exhaled sharply. Then we're not dealing with cultists anymore. This is a syndicate. A military-grade operation. Lyra raised an eyebrow. You think it's foreign? From beyond the sea? Possibly, Inigo said. But right now, I'm more concerned about where they're setting up the next gate. They gathered around the tracefinder again. Surprisingly, it still pulsed faintly. Residual signal, Ariane said. Faint. But it's pulling, south. Korik grunted. Toward the marshes? Toward Hollowmere, Ariane confirmed. Everyone fell silent. Except Inigo, who tilted his head to the side. This was the first time of him hearing that word. What the heck is a Hollowmere? Hollowmere was infamous. Not for monsters or curses but for being dead. An old trading town wiped out decades ago during the last arcane plague. No one had rebuilt. No one dared to, Lyra answered. It's also located in the western continent and it's quite far away. If they're building another gate there, Garen said, then it's deliberate. They know no one patrols that region. Then that's our next destination, Inigo said, eyes hardening. But we don't go blind. He turned toward the Emery. We return to Elandra first. Rest. Resupply. And warn the guild. 2 days later, Elandra Guild Intelligence Hall. The war table was covered in parchment, arcane diagrams and stacks of marked maps. Several guild operatives, dressed in neutral-toned robes, flitted between corners of the room carrying scrolls and reports. Inigo stood at the head of the table, arms crossed. The black shard sat in a sealed vial at the center, under a glass dome inscribed with containment wards. Guildmaster Thorn stood beside him. His expression was drawn, eyes scanning the reports with military precision. 3 sightings of similar obelisks in the past month, Thorn said. One near Felwood Pass. Another deep in the Scarlands. And one unconfirmed, far to the east near the coast. If they activate all 3, Ariane said grimly, they could triangulate a massive rift. Something far more dangerous than what we just fought. You think they're summoning something larger? Thorn asked. I think, she replied, they're trying to bring something through. A commander. A being of power. The room fell quiet. Then Inigo spoke. We need to split our forces. My team will take Hollowmere. We need eyes on the Scarlands and the eastern coast immediately. Thorn nodded. I'll dispatch 2 elite squads. But you'll be on your own again. Inigo smirked slightly. Wouldn't be the first time. Lyra rolled her eyes. Just once I'd like backup that isn't 10 hours late. Thorn chuckled, but it didn't reach his eyes. Take what you need. You leave at dawn. That night, Alandra's western watchtower. The city stretched out below like a painting in gold and stone. Inigo leaned against the parapet, watching the flicker of street lamps and the blur of distant lanterns swaying in merchant carts. Ariane joined him quietly. You're worried. Of course I am. Because of the scale? Because of the silence, Inigo said. This group, they're not screaming their arrival. They're whispering. Building quietly. Coordinating. That scares me more than a demon army. Ariane nodded. Subtlety is the language of confidence. He glanced at her. What happens if we're too late? She didn't answer at first. Then quietly, then we fall back. And try again. Because we're the only ones who can. They stood in silence for a while, listening to the wind. Dawn, departure to Hollowmere. The team assembled by the city gate. The emery was stocked, fuel tanks filled, ammunition crates stacked, and food supplies packed tightly beneath the benches. The crystal lantern from their last mission now glowed faintly on the dashboard. Garen arrived last, mounted on his armored horse. His face was calm but his eyes sharp. You sure you're ready? Inigo asked. I was born ready, Garen replied, deadpan. Korik barked a laugh. You're starting to sound like me. Lyra loaded herself into the turret, stretching. Let's make this one quick. I hate marshes. Inigo looked over the squad, then at the road ahead. Let's move. The gate opened slowly. And as the sun crested the hills, bathing the land in gold, the Amory rumbled forward, toward Hollowmere. The wheels of the Amerype crushed loose gravel as they crossed the final gate. Behind them, the walls of Alandra slowly disappeared in the dust and rising sun. Ahead, the road wound westward into lands seldom traveled, where moss-covered forgotten paths and the air grew thick with history and silence. Inigo leaned back in his seat, adjusting his Desert Eagle holster across his chest. The emblem of the Warbinder cult still lingered in his mind. The Amory rumbled steadily along the half-forgotten trade road, its reinforced tires crushing weeds and roots that had crept over the crumbling cobblestone. Outside, the terrain was beginning to shift, hills giving way to flattened wetlands, trees thinning into crooked willows, and the air growing wetter with each passing hour. Inside the vehicle, the mood was tense but thoughtful. Tell me again, Lyra said from the turret seat, tapping the side of the crystal lantern mounted beside her. Why would anyone want to rebuild Hollowmere into a summoning ground? It's not about Hollowmere, Ariane replied, her voice steady from the middle bench. It's about isolation. No witnesses. No patrols. No one to interrupt. Korik grunted. Still seems stupid. That place is cursed. Every legend says so. Garen turned from his seat near the rear hatch. Legends are usually built on truth. Wasn't it wiped out during the arcane plague? Ariane nodded. 40 years ago. The illness spread fast, but it wasn't natural. Records from that time mention fluctuations in ley lines. Magic going wild. Rituals failing. Corpses rising. The kind of anomalies you'd expect when reality begins to tear. Sounds familiar, Inigo muttered from the driver's seat. They fell quiet for a moment, the hum of the engine filling the void. I don't think Hollowmere was ever abandoned, Inigo added. Not completely. What do you mean? Lyra asked. I mean, what if someone stayed behind? What if they were waiting? Like an advance party? Korik said, cocking his head. Or a sleeper cell, Garen offered. Meant to build the infrastructure slowly over decades. That's insane, Lyra scoffed. Who would wait that long? A cult, Ariane said softly. A long-view faith. One that believes time is irrelevant compared to their goal. Especially if they're summoning something immortal. Inigo gripped the wheel tighter. That's the part that bothers me. Not just the magic. Not just the planning. It's the patience. These people aren't acting like insurgents. They're acting like soldiers. Disciplined ones, Garen added. With funding. Foreign? Lyra asked. Inigo shrugged. Possibly. Maybe even off-continent. Ariane leaned forward, resting her elbows on her knees. If the shard core from the obelisk truly isn't native, then someone is smuggling high-grade magical material across seas. That takes ships, ports, bribed inspectors. Infrastructure. So not a cult, Garen said grimly. An operation. A shadow state, Inigo said. With rituals instead of armies. Heck, I'm even thinking the demon army is behind all of this. The Emery jostled slightly as the road dipped into a shallow ravine, flanked by gnarled roots and the scent of stagnant water. Lyra winced, gripping her seat as the suspension absorbed the bump. It is possible that the demon army is behind all of this, as they were the only one who would benefit to have a rift in our realm. Now that you mentioned it, I think that is probably the case. Ariane shot back. And they don't coordinate across 3 sites in a perfect triangle. Korik scratched his beard. You think they are using those sites as a staging point for another invasion? Ariane hesitated. I think that's the best theory that we have right now. An invasion by the Demon King itself. This is getting worse by the second. Lyra said with a troubling voice. Ariane nodded. We should be ready for it and perhaps stop whatever is it they're planning by going to Hollowmere. Inigo agreed. True. They fell into another silence. The land around them was changing again, green giving way to brown. Marsh grass rose waist-high in some places, and the trees now stood farther apart, their branches drooping with heavy moss. The air was thicker, humid, and faintly metallic. The kind of place that made skin crawl for no visible reason. 3 days later. About 500 kilometers west of Elandra. We're approaching the boundary, Garen said, glancing at a map on his lap. According to guild records, the outskirts of Hollowmere begin 3 kilometers west of the next fork. Inigo nodded. We make camp before that. I want fresh eyes when we cross into the town limits. Korik yawned. Fine by me. Been too long since we had a proper campfire. They stopped shortly after noon. The Emery pulled off what remained of the trail and parked under the protective shade of an old willow grove. Korik and Lyra moved quickly, unpacking the collapsible tents, securing a perimeter with rune markers, and setting a small fire pit with dry bark. Ariane walked the edges of the grove, whispering detection wards. Inigo sat on the bumper of the Emmy, slowly cleaning his shotgun. You're thinking again, Lyra said, tossing him a small ration bar. He caught it. Of course. What's bothering you now? Inigo looked into the marsh ahead. I keep thinking about the obelisk. That diary we found. It mentioned a Master Kale. We never found his body. Lyra frowned. You think he escaped? Maybe. Or maybe he was never there. She followed his gaze. And you think he's in Hollowmere? I think we'll find more than just ruins. Behind them, Ariane returned, her expression guarded. There's ambient magic all around, she said. Thin but constant. Like static clinging to the skin. Hollowmere isn't dead. It's sleeping. Garen joined them. Then we wake it up. Korik threw more wood into the fire and let out a satisfied grunt. Can't wait. Nightfall came quickly. The team huddled around the fire, steam rising from their ration pots as darkness swallowed the horizon. Strange sounds echoed in the distance. Unfamiliar birds, wet splashes, the groan of old wood settling. No one spoke for a long time. Then Inigo finally broke the silence. If this really is a coordinated effort to bring something through, we're already behind. Korik poked the fire. You think the triangle's almost complete? Maybe. Maybe not. But the longer we wait, the more we risk the central point being activated. Ariane looked up sharply. The triangulation theory. If they activate all 3 sites, they can stabilize a gate large enough to bring something through permanently, she finished grimly. Garen looked at her. What kind of being could survive that kind of entry? She hesitated. It's an obvious answer. The demon lords or the king himself. He stood, brushing ash off his gloves. Get some rest. We head into Hollowmere at first light. The others nodded and turned toward their tents. Inigo remained by the fire a moment longer, staring into the flame. His thoughts weren't just about cults or demons anymore. There was a pattern to this chaos. A signature. And he meant to find it. Even if it burned him alive. The morning fog hadn't lifted and it clung to the ground like smoke. The Emery rumbled along a broken dirt road, tires kicking up mud as the vehicle swayed from the uneven path. No one spoke for the first hour. The silence wasn't awkward. It was caution. Everyone felt it. The pressure, like something was watching just outside the treeline. Inigo sat behind the wheel, eyes fixed on the road ahead. The trees around them had changed. No more birds. No bugs. Just pale trunks and black branches, some of them rotting, some still dripping with leftover rain. The marshland had started about an hour back. Now the forest floor was more mud than soil. "Tracefinder still pointing?" he asked without taking his eyes off the road. Ariane nodded from the passenger seat. "Yeah. Still south-southwest. Getting stronger." Lyra had the turret hatch open, her bow resting across her lap. She didn't like swamps. She'd said it 10 times by now. Korik sat near the back, sharpening his axe even though it was already clean. Garen rode alongside on his horse, sticking close to the Mrap's right flank. He didn't like being confined in the vehicle, said it dulled his awareness. About 2 hours later the trees started to thin out. "Up ahead," Ariane said, squinting. Inigo slowed the vehicle. He could see it too now. Wooden posts. Fence remains. Rotting signs barely standing in shallow puddles. One of them had something written in black paint, faded by age and moss. "W. Tahol. Air. This is it," Inigo muttered. He eased the brake and brought the MRP to a full stop. No one spoke. From where they stood, Hollowmere looked like a place time had abandoned. What used to be houses were now skeletons, frames of timber leaning against each other like drunk men trying to stay upright. Roofs had caved in. Doors hung off hinges. Black mold covered almost every surface, and pools of standing water filled what might have once been the town's main square. Lyra climbed down first. She looked around, bow already in hand. "I don't like this." "No one does," Korik replied, stepping out behind her and sniffing the air like a dog. "Smells wrong. Rotting, but not just wood." Garen dismounted slowly. His horse made a low grunt but stayed still. He patted its neck and gave it a soft word before turning toward the group. "I'll circle the perimeter." Half a click. "Make sure nothing's moving in or out." "Take a flare," Inigo said, handing him one from the Mrap's storage rack. "Signal red if anything follows you." The others nodded and began to move carefully into the town. Ariane held up the tracefinder again. The disc pulsed softly, not spinning now, just glowing, pale blue and steady. "This is the place," she confirmed. "The signal's embedded deep. Probably underground or within a sealed structure." Inigo looked around. "All right. Fan out. Stay in pairs. Don't touch anything unless you have to." The town had a strange weight to it. Not just the silence, but the way sound didn't seem to travel far. Their boots splashed in shallow puddles, but the noise faded almost instantly. No echoes. No feedback. Even their own breathing felt muffled. Korik took point near an old blacksmith's ruin. He poked at a rusted anvil with the tip of his axe. "Tools still here," he muttered. "But no bones." "Maybe they buried their dead," Ariane offered from a few feet away. Lyra checked an overturned cart near what used to be the trading post. "Or maybe something took them." She pointed to the mud. "Footprints. Recent." Inigo knelt beside them. One set. Barefoot. Sized. "Days old at most." "They're still here?" Lyra asked. "Or they came back for something," he replied. "Keep your eyes sharp." They pressed deeper. What they found next made them all stop. A house, mostly intact, had light coming from within. Not torchlight. Something fainter. Magical maybe. A dull blue flickering like a soul lantern. It glowed behind one of the broken window slats, then vanished. Inigo signaled with 2 fingers. "Stack up." They approached slowly. No sound. No movement. Korik kicked the door in. It creaked, then collapsed entirely. The place was clean. Not perfect but swept. Dust pushed into corners. A wooden table still stood upright with 2 chairs on either side. And on the table, a sealed bottle of water and a blank sheet of parchment. Lyra picked it up. No writing. Ariane stepped forward and held her hand over the page. "There's a faint trace of mana. Illusion magic. Old." Garen came back in at that moment, breathing a little faster. "No one on the perimeter. But something's wrong. Even the animals avoid this place." "We're not alone," Inigo said. "Someone's been maintaining this house. Or someone very recently did." Ariane adjusted her gloves. We should set up here. Use this building as our base. I agree, Inigo nodded. Secure the perimeter. Check the attic and basement. I want full visibility. They swept the house top to bottom. The attic was empty, just rafters and a broken window. The basement was worse. Wet. Cracked stone. But nothing moved. No hidden rooms. They returned to the ground floor and began unpacking light gear. The sun had started to dip by then. What little warmth the day had was fading. Korik blocked the windows with planks. Lyra laid out tripwire alarms around the front entrance. Garen refilled his water from his horse's supply bag and stood by the window watching. Ariane sat cross-legged in one corner, tracefinder in hand. It's still glowing. Whatever power source or magic signature it's tracking, it's nearby. Inigo cleaned his gun silently. The wind picked up outside. But it didn't sound like wind. Sounded like breathing. They all froze. What the hell was that? Lyra whispered. No one answered. They waited. The sound faded again. Just wind now. Inigo stood. We hold position tonight. No one sleeps at the same time. Rotate watches. We move again at sunrise. Everyone nodded. Outside, Hollowmere remained silent. But it was listening. And something inside the town wasn't ready to be found. The silence didn't last. It started with the soft scrape of boots across wet ground, barely audible, almost part of the wind. Then came the creak of old wood shifting. Somewhere beyond the collapsed buildings something moved. Not fast. Not loud. Just there. Watching. Waiting. Inside the ruined house, Inigo sat upright with his shotgun resting across his lap. He hadn't slept. Neither had Ariane, who sat cross-legged near the table, her hand hovering over the tracefinder. Its glow had intensified slightly, pulsing like a heartbeat. Korik stood by the door with his axe drawn, peering through a crack in the wood. They're not gone. No, Inigo said quietly. Just hiding again. The others gathered in silence. Lyra was nursing a scrape on her shoulder. Garen had a fresh dent in his pauldron but nothing serious. No one had died but they all knew how close it was. Tracefinder? Inigo asked. Ariane nodded. Still reacting. Stronger than before. The source is definitely below us. Then we find the entrance. They moved out cautiously. Hollowmere's buildings loomed like skeletons in fog. The sun was just beginning to rise, casting long, sharp shadows across the empty town square. Most of the cultist bodies from the night before had been dragged off or disintegrated. Only a few blood smears remained. They followed the signal through the town's center and toward the old chapel. The roof was partially collapsed and vines had grown across the stained glass. A broken bell lay shattered near the steps. This was the biggest structure in town, Ariane said. If anything's hidden underground, it'd be here. Korik kicked the doors open with one solid boot. The wooden panels fell inward with a thud. Inside, the pews were broken and the altar was cracked down the middle. But something stood out immediately. Behind the altar, the stone wall was newer. Different color. Less worn. Rebuilt, Garen said. Recently. Inigo stepped closer and tapped it with the butt of his shotgun. It echoed hollowly. Help me move it. Korik and Garen dug their fingers into the edges and shoved. After a few grunts, the fake wall gave way, revealing a narrow staircase descending into darkness. A cold breath of air flowed out from below. Lyra pulled her hood up. Why is it always basements? Inigo flicked on a tactical light attached to his gun. Let's move. One by one they descended. The crypt wasn't natural. It had been carved, not like a burial site but like a bunker. The walls were smooth stone, reinforced with ancient sigils and newer metal supports. It was a mix of old and new. Sacred and military. Torches lined the walls, unlit, but the deeper they went, the more the tracefinder pulsed. About 50 steps down they reached a chamber. It was circular, maybe 20 feet wide, with a high ceiling. The center held an obelisk, just like the one they'd destroyed in the forest. But this one was intact. Glowing faintly. Black shard core embedded at the top. Found it, Ariane whispered. As she raised her hand toward the tracefinder, a symbol lit up across the floor. An arcane circle previously invisible. Ward. Inigo shouted. Move. Too late. The trap activated. A burst of magical force exploded outward, throwing the team back against the walls. Ariane slammed into a pillar and groaned. Korik rolled and came up on his feet. Lyra hit the ground hard and cursed. The obelisk began to hum. And from the far side of the chamber, something began to rise from the ground. A stone platform lifted, revealing a humanoid figure chained and unconscious, eyes closed. His skin was pale, almost gray, and he was covered in ritual markings. "What the hell is that?" Lyra muttered. Before anyone could answer, a voice rang out through the crypt, calm, cold, and familiar. "You should not have come." The Lady of Illusion. Her voice echoed not from a direction but from everywhere. The obelisk flared and a projection formed, a flickering image of her standing over the chained figure. "He is not ready," she said. "But your presence forces my hand." Inigo raised his weapon. "Shut it down." Too late. The chains broke with a sound like thunder. The figure gasped awake. And the room exploded in chaos. The chained man rose with unnatural grace, floating inches above the platform as the ritual markings on his body glowed red, then purple, then an ominous black. His eyes opened, pale white, lifeless yet aware. Not human anymore. He screamed. Not out of pain but as if announcing his arrival. A concussive wave shot outward from his body. Korik dropped to a knee, bracing with his axe. Lyra rolled behind a fallen column, already drawing an arrow. Ariane tried to cast a containment ward, but the moment her hand moved, her mana fizzled out. Something in the air was wrong. Heavy. Distorted. The projection of the Lady of Illusion flickered but didn't disappear. "He is not complete, but he is enough. A prototype. A harbinger." Inigo fired first. The blast from his shotgun hit the floating man in the chest, but it barely staggered him. A dull ripple passed through the man's torso as if the shot had hit water. Then he lunged. Fast. Inigo barely ducked in time. The harbinger's arms swept through the air like a blade, slicing a deep groove into the stone wall behind him. Garen charged, sword raised high, and slammed it down on the figure's shoulder. Sparks flew. The harbinger grunted but didn't bleed. He backhanded Garen, sending him flying across the room. "Focus fire." Inigo shouted. Lyra loosed an enchanted arrow. It struck true, piercing the harbinger's thigh. For a moment the figure faltered, giving Korik just enough of an opening to leap in and slam his axe into the harbinger's side. The weapon connected, and cracked the surface of the creature's skin. A hiss escaped its lips. "His shell's breaking." Korik yelled. "Hit him hard." Ariane, gritting her teeth, recharged her mana and launched a burst of compressed light straight into the creature's chest. It staggered. Inigo fired again. The harbinger stumbled. And with a roar, Garen returned, sword blazing, and drove his blade through the creature's chest, pinning it to the obelisk. There was a flash of light. Then silence. The harbinger slumped, still twitching, and the obelisk cracked down the center. The tracefinder dimmed. For now, it was over. The mist hadn't cleared before the ground rumbled again. "Shit," Inigo muttered, reloading quickly. The obelisk, now split in two, let out a low hollow hum before both halves shattered into glowing dust. That dust didn't settle. It drifted upwards like sparks from a fire, merging with the black mist that the beast had left behind. "She's channeling something," Ariane said, her voice tight. "The lady, she's using the mist to fuel another summon. Or worse." "Then we kill it before it finishes," Garen growled. "No," Ariane said, grabbing Inigo's arm. "We stop the ritual. There's a difference." A low chant echoed from the walls. They weren't words, not in any language any of them recognized, but they felt wrong. Like they were crawling over their skin. Under it. Through their skulls. Lyra winced and covered her ears. "That sound, it's in my head." Inigo scanned the walls. "Where's it coming from?" "There." Ariane pointed at a raised platform near the edge of the chamber that had previously been buried under rubble. It had shifted during the fight. Runes glowed faintly on its surface. "That's an altar. She's still bound to this place. This is her anchor." "Then we cut the anchor," Inigo said, already moving. Korik, still winded, stumbled upright. "Give me 10 seconds to stand. I'll join you." "Take your time," Inigo replied. "We might only have 8. They ran, Inigo, Lyra and Garen toward the altar. As they neared, shadowy figures began to materialize in their path. Transparent at first, then more solid. Illusionary guardians. Wraiths in ragged robes with blades for arms and no faces. Just blank porcelain masks. Get ready. Garen barked. The first of the wraiths lunged at Inigo. He ducked, fired twice point blank. The thing vaporized in a puff of mist, but two more replaced it immediately. Lyra shot through one's head. Her arrow hit the runes behind it, but the wraith dissipated. They're weak, she said. But endless. Keep moving. Inigo said. Garen charged ahead, swinging his sword in broad arcs. He cleared a path through the next few, but they kept coming. From the walls, the floor, even the air. They didn't make a sound. No growl. No scream. Just the slicing of air and the cold pressure of death closing in. Behind them, Ariane remained in the center of the room, drawing sigils in the air as fast as she could. She was building a containment ward, something to sever the connection between the lady and her anchor. It required time. And power. A lot of both. Inigo, she called. I can't do it alone. Someone has to inscribe the outer circle manually. Garen, go. Inigo ordered. I'll hold them off. No, Garen said, blocking a swipe from a wraith's blade. You go. You've got the gun. You're faster. Inigo didn't argue. He turned and sprinted toward Ariane. She tossed him a piece of chalk enchanted with runic silver, and pointed to the edges of the room. Start carving where the energy lines converge. There, and there. He didn't ask questions. He moved. Sliding to the first point, he began carving. His hands trembled slightly, not from fear but from how wrong the air felt. Like it didn't belong to this world. Back at the altar, Lyra and Garen fought side by side. Wraiths kept appearing. She switched to enchanted arrows again, each one burning like fire through the mist. Garen fought with blunt force, crushing and cleaving the illusions apart. They were outnumbered. But they held. The ritual circle began to glow. Then the air split. Not just a sound but the world itself. A rift, thin as a crack in glass, formed in the center of the chamber over the ruined obelisk. Something shimmered behind it. A landscape not of this world. Purple skies. Blackened plains. Floating monoliths. A world of demons. She's opening a portal, Ariane whispered. This was the plan all along. And the harbinger? Inigo asked from across the room, finishing the second carving. Just a warm-up. A shadow stepped through the rift. It wasn't like the beast they had fought earlier. This one was humanoid. Wearing robes that fluttered in wind that didn't exist. Its face was covered by a steel mask, but its eyes glowed like twin stars. It didn't attack. It simply raised a hand. And every wraith in the room stopped. Then turned to face Ariane. She froze. Inigo, she screamed. He ran. Too slow. The wraiths surged forward, 10-20 of them, all aimed at the same point. Garen turned mid-fight. Ariane. But it was Lyra who reached her first. The archer stepped between Ariane and the wraiths and unleashed her last 3 arrows in one breath. One struck a wraith's mask and burst into flames. Another pierced a chest. Third, missed. A wraith slipped past her. Ariane raised her arm. Too late. The blade slashed downward. Blood sprayed. But it wasn't Ariane's. It was Lyra's. She had stepped back into its path. No. Inigo reached them and fired point blank, blasting the wraith into vapor. Lyra collapsed. Ariane caught her. I'm fine, Lyra tried to say. She wasn't. The chamber trembled again. The portal was widening. We have to finish it now, Ariane said, eyes shining with rage and fear. Inigo nodded and placed the last rune. The circle snapped to life. Light exploded outward in a ring and the rift shuddered. The figure on the other side tilted its head. Then, stepped back into the portal. And the rift slammed shut. The wraiths vanished. The light died. And silence returned. Inigo knelt by Lyra's side, hand shaking as he checked her pulse. She's alive, Ariane whispered, barely audible. But she wasn't waking up. She saved me, Ariane said, her voice cracking. Inigo looked up at the ceiling of the crypt, the last glow of the circle fading around them. He didn't speak. There was nothing to say. Only breath. Only blood. Only survival. For now. Okay, Ariane, you are the healer of the group, so heal her immediately. Ariane's hands were already moving. Her fingers trembled as she pulled a small crystal vial from the pouch on her belt and poured it over Lyra's wound. The liquid shimmered faintly, reacting with the blood as it touched her skin. She placed her palms over the slash, pressing down gently. A warm, golden light pulsed beneath her fingers. Come on, Ariane whispered. The cut across Lyra's chest had gone deep. Too deep. She had taken the brunt of the Wraith's strike. If the blade had gone any lower. Ariane pushed more mana into her spell. A healing sigil formed in the air, floating just above her hands. The lines were shaky, but they held. Light trickled down into the wound, knitting torn flesh and stopping the bleeding. Lyra groaned. Inigo let out a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. That's good. That's good, right? She'll live, Ariane said, beads of sweat forming on her forehead. But it'll take time before she wakes up. She lost a lot of blood. She didn't stop the spell yet. The glow deepened as she stabilized the damage to Lyra's ribs and checked for internal bleeding. Every second of healing cost her more energy. The last few days had already drained her reserves, but she didn't stop until the worst was over. Finally, she dropped her hands. The light faded. Lyra's breathing had steadied. Her skin was no longer pale. But Ariane was swaying. Sit down, Inigo said, catching her before she tipped over. I'm fine, she muttered. You're not, he said. Don't argue. Korik and Garen moved in closer now that the room was quiet again. Korik knelt beside Lyra, placing one hand gently on her shoulder. She always jumps in head first, he murmured. Reckless. Brave, Garen added. She saved both of you. Ariane sank to the ground beside Inigo, resting her back against a broken pillar. The spell drained everything. I need 10 minutes. Maybe more. Take it, Inigo said. We're not moving until everyone can walk. He looked around the ruined crypt. The shattered obelisk, the remains of the altar, the faint residue of demonic energy still hanging in the air. No one spoke for a while. Just breathing. The weight of survival settling in. Then slowly Inigo stood. I'll check the perimeter, he said quietly. Make sure there's not another round waiting for us. Garen nodded and followed him. And in that brief moment of stillness, Ariane closed her eyes, just for a minute. She had saved Lyra. But she knew it wasn't over. The Lady of Illusion had retreated. The circle had closed, but only for now. Ariane could still feel it, like a bruise on the fabric of magic. The lady was wounded, yes. Forced to pull back. But that presence, it hadn't gone far. It lingered beyond the veil, just waiting for the next weakness. The next mistake. She looked at Lyra again. The archer's chest rose and fell steadily. Alive. That mattered more than anything. Across the room, Korik sat with his axe across his knees, silent. Garen leaned against the wall, eyes fixed on the portal's remains. The crypt was silent now, too silent. No shifting mist. No echoing chants. Just the faint sound of breathing, of steel being sheathed, and boots shifting over broken stone. Inigo adjusted the strap of his rifle and stepped deeper into the corridor leading out from the chamber. The torchlight on the walls barely reached beyond the archways, and most of the sconces had long since rotted or fallen. Garen followed a few steps behind, his sword still drawn. Anything? Garen asked. Just shadows, Inigo replied. They cleared one hallway then another. Nothing moved. No new threats, no lingering presence. But even without danger, the weight of the encounter still hung over them. The Lady of Illusion had pulled back, but they all knew she hadn't been banished, only delayed. After a few more minutes of checking each path, they made their way back. Ariane hadn't moved. She was still sitting on the floor, resting her head against the pillar. Lyra lay beside her, covered in a blanket torn from one of their packs. Her breathing remained stable, her color slowly returning. Korik hadn't spoken, only kept watch, eyes shifting between Lyra and the broken altar like he expected it to rise again. We're clear, Inigo said, setting his rifle down gently and crouching beside Ariane. She didn't open her eyes. Good. You okay? He asked. No. Appreciate the honesty. Ariane finally looked at him. Her face was pale, not from fear but from mana depletion. I can't cast for a few hours. Not even a spark. Inigo nodded. We'll hold tight. Korik stood up slowly. This town. Hollowmere. It wasn't just a nest. It was a testing ground. For what? Garen asked. Korik stared at the place where the rift had opened. For breaking reality. No one spoke for a while. Then Garen leaned against the wall again and exhaled slowly. How long until Lyra wakes up? Another hour, maybe 2, Ariane said. Her body's strong but healing like that. It's taxing. She'll need rest. Inigo sat down next to her. He picked up a small rock and rolled it between his fingers. I thought we were dealing with cultists. Some rogue magic. Not full-blown demon kind. That wasn't just demon kind, Ariane said. That was a rift to the other side. Someone's helping them from this world. The lady didn't open that alone. Inigo nodded. The Hollowmere cult. They must be working with the demon army. It's more than that, Ariane said. They're preparing this place. Every ruined town, every forgotten village. They're testing which places can hold a rift. How stable it is. How long they can keep it open. Korik added, then when they figure it out, they'll open 10. Maybe 100. Inigo stood up. Then we stop them before that happens. Ariane looked like she wanted to argue but she didn't. She simply nodded. The party rested in silence for a while longer. Inigo kept watch, pacing slowly around the room while the others stayed close to the center. The crypt felt less hostile now, but not safe. Eventually Lyra stirred. Her hand twitched first. Then her head shifted slightly. Finally her eyes opened barely. Hey, Ariane said softly, leaning closer. Take it slow. Lyra blinked. You're okay? You should be asking yourself that, Inigo said, kneeling next to her with a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. Lyra tried to sit up, winced and fell back. Hey. That hurts. You took a blade to the chest, Korik said. Be glad it hurts. Means you're alive. Lyra groaned. Dumb move. Brave move, Ariane corrected. You saved me. Garen handed her a canteen which she sipped from slowly. Her color was returning little by little, and though her movement was slow, her eyes had focus now. Did we win? She asked. Inigo answered. We stopped the ritual. Closed the rift. But not for good, Ariane added quietly. They'll try again. Lyra let out a breath. Then we kill them next time. Korik chuckled. There's the fighter we know. Inigo glanced at Ariane. We need to bring this to the guildmaster. The capital needs to know what happened here. And fast. Garen nodded. We'll report. But more than that, we need to start planning countermeasures. If the Hollowmere cult is part of something bigger. They are, Ariane said. I felt it. That masked figure. It wasn't a servant. It was a general. A demon general? Korik asked. Ariane looked grim. Or worse. A herald. A mouthpiece for something stronger. They let the idea settle in. Inigo finally said, let's get out of here. This place is making my skin crawl. With Lyra able to sit up, barely, the team helped her to her feet, supporting her as they made their way out of the crypt. The hallways were still dark, but the pressure had lifted. No more illusions. No more chance. Just the eerie quiet of a place abandoned by time and sanity. As they stepped into the fading light outside, Hollowmere looked the same. But they didn't. None of them did. They had survived something that wasn't supposed to be survivable. Faced a rift to the demon realm and walked out breathing. But that didn't feel like victory. Felt like the first move in a war. The sun had barely moved. Time didn't seem to work right in Hollowmere. Either it passed too slow or not at all. The shadows in the street hadn't shifted since they entered the crypt. The sky above remained a pale gray, neither day nor evening. It made it hard to tell how long they'd been down there. Inigo adjusted the strap on his pack and looked over his shoulder. Lyra was walking on her own now, one hand against the wall for support. Garen stayed close to her side in case she stumbled again. Ariane followed behind, slower than usual. Her mana was still drained and she looked like she hadn't slept in days. Korik took the lead, axe in hand. He didn't speak much anymore, not since they stepped out of the crypt. He was watching the buildings now. Listening. Every creak of broken wood or gust of wind made his head turn sharply. They reached the center of town where the blackened statue of the Hollowmere founder still stood. Only now it was cracked straight down the middle and something like soot covered the lower half. Did the wraiths do that? Garen asked. No, Inigo said. That happened before we got here. It wasn't like this in the reports, Lyra muttered. None of this was. The cult, the obelisk, the rift. That's because they didn't survive long enough to report it, Korik said. Ariane glanced at a building nearby, its upper floor collapsed inward. The windows were all broken. A sign hung loosely by a rusted chain, Winnow's Apothecary. Plants had grown through the floorboards, vines reaching into the doorway like fingers. He swallowed. We need to burn it. Excuse me, Garen said. This town, she clarified. The cult tainted it. There are runes embedded in the stone in the wood. It's already been prepped as a summoning site. Even if the rift is closed, the foundation is still marked. Inigo looked around. She wasn't wrong. Every few feet, strange markings were etched into the stone. Barely visible unless you knew what to look for. The kind of magic that seeped into the bones of a place. Anchors. Like roots waiting to sprout. If someone comes back and tries again, Ariane said. They'll pick up right where they left off, Inigo finished. No one argued after that. They made camp just beyond the town's entrance, far enough from the ruins to sleep without staring into darkness. Garen lit the fire. Korik sharpened his axe. Lyra rested with her back to a tree, hood pulled over her eyes, though she didn't sleep. Not really. None of them did. Ariane sat beside Inigo on a flat rock, her legs curled beneath her. You ever wonder how far this goes? She asked after a while. The cult. No. The plan. She gestured toward the ruins. Opening rifts. Summoning beasts. Whatever's pulling the strings from the other side. It's not just random chaos. They're building something, Inigo said. A foothold. She nodded slowly. We just knocked down their first attempt. He looked into the fire. And they'll try again. Somewhere else. Ariane pulled her cloak tighter around her shoulders. I want to stop it before it spreads. But we're not enough. I'm sure the king wouldn't stand idly with the issue. They'll send in more troops to the other sites and take care of destroying it themselves while we focus on our main objective, which is hunting the Demon King. Okay, how are we going to destroy this town? It's huge. Ariane asked. I just got an idea, Inigo said as he purchased 50 C4's explosives at the cost of 15,000 tokens. He materialized one of them and explained. I will plant this thing across the town and set it off simultaneously. This should destroy the town and whatever is left. Inigo moved first, setting the charge beneath the ruined apothecary. He knelt by the cracked stone foundation, glancing at the faint rust-colored sigils etched into the mortar, traces of the cult's presence. He wedged the explosive under a floorboard and secured it with adhesive. His breath hitched slightly, but his expression stayed stoic. Lyra took the next charge. She and Korik lifted a glaring slab beneath the broken statue in the square, slotted the device underneath and covered it carefully. She looked to Inigo, who gave her a tight nod in reply. She tucked the trigger safely in her pouch. They moved in small teams. One charge planted under the old inn's support beams, another inside the abandoned blacksmith's forge, and another beneath what used to be the barracks. Each placement felt like a blow, but also like needed surgery. Ariane and Garen followed them to the chapel. The final, most critical charge went beneath the altar's base, inside the crypt. That obelisk's ritual glow still haunted her mind. This device would bring down not just stone, but unmake its tainted foundation. At dusk, they withdrew to a ridge just beyond town. Garen stood guard with a flare, Lyra knocked an arrow, Korik racked his axe, and Ariane held the tracefinder. It pulsed once. Inigo clicked the detonator's trigger. First came a dull rumble. Walls blew outward like petals, panes shattered, doors blasted off hinges. Flames erupted where charges blew in the apothecary and forge. The obelisk-capped altar shattered, the crypt ceiling trembling as stone collided and dust cloaked the square. They watched the town crumble structure by structure. The statue toppled in a snapshot of collapse, the inn's roof caved in. Embers flared through broken windows. Black smoke spiraled into a gray evening sky. They waited for the earth to stop shaking before moving closer. When they finally crept forward, the town wasn't what it had been. Foundations and beams lay in splinters. Rubble choked the cobblestones. Dust covered twisted metal and scorched timber. But the earth beneath it was cracked and strangely hollow in one spot. A low tremor suggested something still alive below. Ariane, still drained, laid her hand on the rubble and whispered a cleansing prayer. Pale green runic light drifted across broken stone. "Foundations broken," she said. "No trace anchor remains on the surface." Inigo surveyed the ruins, tension prickling through him. "We did it." Before they could move on, a deeper groan rattled the ground. A seam cracked open among collapsed debris. That hidden hatch, sealed by cultists, slid open, triggering a burst of dust and stale air. Behind it lay a tunnel. Fractured stone walls led downward. Ariane stepped forward. They built under Hollowmere too. Inigo clenched his jaw. "We stop it now. Or it lives for the next guy." He gestured to his pack. "Flash flower and det cord, let's collapse this." They placed charges in the hatch and along its edges, lit the fuse and dove back just as fire and dust cascaded into the opening. A loud boom followed, the tunnel collapsing in on itself. Debris compacted. The rumble subsided. The ground settled, but the hatch was gone. Lyra stood trembling, her breath harsh in her chest. "I don't ever want to see this place again." Korik wiped sweat from his brow. "Then we make sure it never comes back." Night fell. They made a rainproof camp on the ridge. No one slept for long, not properly. The embers below glowed against black collapsed walls. At dawn they packed up. A fresh wind caught embers and carried ash across the ground. All that remained of Hollowmere was scorched rubble, a collapsed crater and cold wind in empty streets. Lyra squatted beside the statue's cracked base, a piece of ash caught in her palm. "They'll remember the name but not the town," she said softly. Ariane nodded. "It's ours as long as we carry it." Inigo looked distant. "We go tomorrow. Alandra needs this mess cleaned up. The guild needs every scrap of intel on cult networks. If this wasn't the only site, we need to move fast." Garen mounted his horse. "The king will be glad you handled it so thoroughly." Military-grade solution. Lyra gave him a half-smile. "Destruction is easy. Rebuilding always costs more." Korik slung his axe. "Then let's just keep moving. Clean up and follow up." Before leaving, they spread the ashes in a line across the ridge's edge, so nothing could grow or take root. A simple ritual: clear the ground, sprinkle what remains, bury the negative. As they departed, Hollowmere's crater melted behind them in misty sunrise. None of them spoke much. Each carried their own thoughts: the evil they'd seen, the people they'd fought, the cost of victory. It felt more like sacrifice than triumph, but they had survived and they had won tonight. Inigo slowed the MRV just outside the crater's edge. He jumped down, approached the crater and looked into the smoldering mess. A few embers still burned. The shapes were indistinct under the smoke, but the message was clear. Nothing was left. No roots, no tunnels, no chance to return. He took off his gloves, touching his fingers to the ash. "Fokul. Final." He climbed back into the driver's seat. "Let's go," he said softly. Lyra eased into the passenger seat, exhaustion in her stance. Ariane sat in the back. Garen rode alongside. Korik climbed in behind the wheel bay. He started the engine. As the Emery crawled away from Hollowmere, he glanced back just once at the smoldering crater. It looked like a scar on the land, something raw and hard to forget. But if that's what real change looks like, he told himself, then scars are worth bearing. They drove west toward Alandra and the guild. Their journey was far from over. What they destroyed here was just one site in a larger darkness, and something else waited beyond these hills. A bigger fight. A broader war. The road to Alandra was muddy from the last week's rain, but their Emery pushed through without trouble. There were no ambushes, no patrols, no strange sights, just the quiet, steady approach of a group who had seen too much and had too much to say. When the city walls finally came into view, it was late afternoon. Smoke drifted lazily from chimneys. Merchants were packing up stalls. A few children watched them from the edge of the market road, eyes wide as the soot-streaked Emery rolled past. They weren't used to seeing vehicles that looked like it had come straight from a battlefield. Not to mention a real IC vehicle not drawn by horses. They arrived and parked in front of the guild. They didn't speak as they disembarked. Lyra pulled off her gloves. Ariane straightened her robes. Garen and Korik stepped out with weapons still slung. Inigo wiped the ash from his jacket, but didn't bother cleaning the rest of him. It would tell the story well enough. Inside, the guild's main war room was waiting. Thorn, the guildmaster, stood with 2 aides and a wall-sized map behind him. He didn't sit. He never did when expecting reports from field teams. His expression sharpened the moment they entered. "You made it back," Thorn said. "We got your relay message yesterday. I want the full debrief." Inigo stepped forward, removing a folded report from his coat. "We destroyed Hollowmere." Thorn frowned. "Destroyed it? Why did you do so?" Ariane stepped beside Inigo. "Because there was a partial opening. We engaged what looked like a demon. Possibly a lieutenant figure. It pulled back when we closed the rift, but the site was tainted. The structures, the ground, even the crypt foundation. It had to be destroyed." "We buried the town," Korik added simply. Thorn folded his arms. "I assume that wasn't metaphorical." "We planted C4 at 5 major anchor points," Inigo confirmed. "Then collapsed a sealed tunnel underneath the town. Any remaining trace was neutralized." Thorn tilted his head to the side. "C4. It's an explosive that we use," Inigo explained. "I see. What about the other sites?" Lyra asked. Thorn motioned to the map behind him. 2 other guild teams were dispatched to similar suspected anchor points. Both encountered resistance. One had to call in reinforcements from the Royal Guard. "They survive?" Garen asked. "Barely," Thorn said. "But they destroyed the anchor points. The ruins are under protective warding until the mages can finish cleansing. This isn't an isolated effort anymore. Whatever this cult is, they were acting fast. Too fast for how scattered they appeared 6 months ago." Inigo asked, "Any leads on the figure in the mask?" "The one Ariane called a herald." "Nothing conclusive yet," Thorn admitted. "But 3 different teams reported similar descriptions. Robed, masked, not entirely corporeal. We think it's the same entity moving between sites. Possibly even coordinating." "That's not just a cult anymore," Lyra muttered. "That's the command structure of a demon race." Thorn nodded. "We agree. Which is why you are to resume your duties to venture into the rift and hunt the Demon King." Ariane looked up. "Very well, we will do so."